But Pallas now tide's soul inspires, fills with her force, and warms with all her fires, above the Greeks his deathless fame to raise, and crown her hero with distinguished praise. So, book 5. We start getting into some more of the nitty gritty, some of the more daring exploits that happened during the course of this war. So Athena goes down to the battlefield and she inspires Diomed, aka Titus, to run into the middle of the thick of the fight. And Diomed is opposed, of course, by Phegeus, who tries to take him down with a spear and misses. Diomed then launches his spear, and Diomed does not miss. Idaeus, who's Phegeus' brother, tries to flee and is almost killed, but is saved by Vulcan, who owes a debt to Idaeus' father. Now, why Vulcan didn't save both the brothers is kind of a mystery, but it doesn't really go into that, so we're not going to worry about that too much. So Mars starts to get involved, but Athena, using her feminine wiles, convinces him to just step aside and that they should both just sort of sit back and watch, conveniently ignoring the fact that she literally just went in and started, like, prodding Diomed and being like, you need to go fight. You need to go fight. Don't you want to go fight? You see a lot of this, of them doing sort of a do as I say, not as I do type thing with these guys. You especially see it with Zeus later on. So anyway, the fighting continues. There's several pages. I think it came down to like 4 pages of just a list of who dies, how they die, and who kills them. And it's important in the sense that, like, the Vietnam Wall is important. This sort of we're gonna do a little sidebar here, but this whole thing sort of acted as like a living history, where these people, like, people would be able to point to it and say, oh, that was my father, that's how he died, that's our family's claim. And being able to sort of point to this it was sort of a badge of honor for a lot of people, and especially because whether you believe this war happened or not, we'll just go under the assumption that it did happen. Certainly there was a lot of strife and there was a lot of fighting during the time that this work was being written, that this was all being passed around. It was a lot of people would just go off to war and you never heard anything about them. They just disappeared. I mean, it's the same with a lot of wars. In more modern times, we are a lot better about keeping track of our missing in action and keeping track of our prisoners of war. But there's a reason that we have monuments to these people, and there's a reason that we still honor even the people that we know for sure died, and we know how they died, because it's just sort of a way of giving closure to everybody. So I don't want to make light of this, but by the same token, if you're not directly related to these people, it can be kind of tedious to read. So I did read it, but I'm not gonna put you guys through that. This video would be like 30 minutes long if I did that. So anyway, we jump back into the thick of things. We jump back to Pandarus, who is one of the Trojans. He fires an arrow at Diomed, which I didn't mention earlier, but Diomed is one of the Greeks, which you might have guessed because Athena is the one who is sort of his patron at this point. So Pandarus fires an arrow at Diomed and wounds him. Pandarus brags about being able to wound Diomed, which is pretty impressive after having just seen Diomed kill Phegeus. So Pandora sort of tries to use this as a way to like sort of rally his troops, which it's not a bad idea, and it's a very old method, and there's a reason that it works. So Diomed, who is wounded now, calls upon Athena, who grants his request, and she heals him. She also gives him the ability to discern who is a god and who is not, and she tells him that he cannot he cannot like attack any of the gods unless he sees Venus. As you can tell, Athena is still kind of pissy about about that whole golden apple thing. So Diomed, being a young, strapping little Greek, goes right back to fighting. So he runs around killing more people until he comes across Aeneas. And Aeneas is actually he's the son of Venus, so it's kind of very important that the two of these guys meet. And so this is, I don't want to say fate or anything, but this is definitely setting things up to where if where it's pretty obvious that that at some point Athena's probably going to try to come in. Not Athena, but Venus is going to try to come in and be part of this and keep Diomed from killing Aeneas. So Diomed runs around, like I said, runs around killing. He comes across Aeneas, starts to fight Aeneas. Pandarus shows up and comes to Aeneas's aid. Aeneas and Pandarus discuss Diomed and mention that he must have divine protection. They do a lot of talking. It's like 2 or 3 pages where these guys are talking as Diomed is, I guess, slowly approaching them across the battlefield. I'm not sure. Maybe they don't really go into it too much, but probably he gets distracted. Some of the other troops try to stop him. But anyway, it was kind of amusing to me that these two have like a 4-page conversation as Diomed is slowly coming there to kill both of them. So Panders throws his lance and manages to wound Diomed. We're seeing echoes of what happened earlier. So Diomed is less than enthusiastic about that, so he kills Diomed. Not Diomed, he kills Pandarus. So then Diomed throws a fucking boulder at Aeneas, but the kid is saved in time by Venus, who swoops down because, as I mentioned, Aeneas is her child. Diomed pursues Venus and wounds her on the hand, which doesn't sound like that bad of a wound, but you also have to remember that Venus is a goddess, and she has probably never been hurt like this before. Certainly you don't see this happen a lot in Greek and Roman mythology, but we'll get into that later. So Venus, understandably, freaks out, and Aeneas has to be rescued by Apollo, or Phoebus, whichever we choose to go with. Diomed then insults her, and I actually kind of like this, so I'm going to read this part verbatim. Ill with Jove's daughter bloody fights agree, the field of combat is no scene for thee. Go, let thy own soft sex employ thy care, go lull the coward or delude the fair. Taught by this stroke, renounce the war's alarms and learn to tremble at the name of arms. So it's pretty obvious that he is insulting Venus, but you also sort of have to be like, she didn't really have a spot in this strife to begin with. In the overall scheme of things, yes, she's the reason that all of this started, and I'm sure Diomed sort of knew this. I'm sure pretty much everybody knows this at this point, because it would have been common knowledge pretty much. I doubt they would have done much to try to ignore or cover it up, fake news if you will. But So I'm sure everybody on the Greek side and probably on the Trojan side as well knows exactly why this war is being fought. So it's sort of understandable that Diomed, having finally found the object that started this whole thing, not technically the object, but you sort of get the idea, the vessel that started this whole thing, he's understandably not just going to be like, oh, yeah, go on, get off the field. No, he's going to be very angry, and I think it shows based off of it, and very like insulting based off of what we just heard. So Iris arrives to help Venus escape. She flees. Iris takes Venus to Mars, who agrees to help. And it's also worth mentioning at this point that Mars and Venus have always sort of had a thing. Some of the stories even say that she was originally supposed to marry him. Um, but then her current husband, Hephaestus, sort of tricked Zeus and Hera into giving, and that's into giving him Athene and to giving him Venus, and that's a whole side story. We won't worry about that right now, but it is worth mentioning that Venus and Mars both have a pre-existing relationship in this, and so it's understandable that when she goes to Mars and he sees that she's wounded, he's going to be a little more excited to act on this. So she petitions him for help, but there's more pettiness between the gods. Juno and Juno and Athena both are sort of like they don't really make snide comments, but there is a line that Juno and Pallas with a smile surveyed, and this meaning watching Venus sort of cry about having gotten hurt. Zeus makes a comment that maybe Venus should stay out of here, but we don't further see her response. So I guess it's not really necessary, but it sort of feels like he's condescending to her. But again, as I've said before, she's not known for getting into these scrapes. She's not known for being a brilliant tactician like Athena is. She's not known, like, she doesn't really have a lot going for her. In fact, in most myths, it's very difficult to find her with an actual weapon. Usually she uses her charms. She uses her, like, just basically her everything to sort of smooth things over, and that's how she wins like all of her fights. Um so it's a little degrading, but at the same time, she's not Athena. She's not even Artemis, who's the goddess of the hunt, and she's not any of these guys. She's the goddess of love, and love can be brutal, but sometimes it's not as bad as war. Um, so Mars, down on Earth, Diomed is continuing to brag about having just wounded Venus. Mars starts to get annoyed by this, and so he goes down to the Trojans to sort of incite them up to start fighting. He Mars even agrees to fight beside Hector, and it's not really mentioned. You don't really get but I don't really get the impression that the Trojans really know that this is Mars. There's a lot of the gods like disguising themselves as mortals, and I mean that's in fact like sort of why Athena gave Diomed the ability to discern who was a mortal and who was not, and who was a god, because they can be whatever they want to be. I mean, hell, in later myths, Zeus comes down and gets a woman pregnant by turning himself into a shower of golden light, which we're not even going to go there because that's a whole nother story. Anyway, um, So Apollo also helps out Mars, and he rallies the Trojan troops. And part of how he does that is he brings back Aeneas. We all remember him. And Apollo, being one of the gods, being the god of healing, he had healed Aeneas. So Aeneas is back and unharmed. Yay! Everybody's happy. Menelaus finally joins in on the fighting. Everyone is waiting on the result. Everyone is sort of waiting on the result now that Menelaus and Hector are both engaged. I mean, it would be better if Paris were, but as we learned a couple videos ago, Paris is sort of a wimp. Anyway, so everyone is sort of waiting on the results of this, sort of with bated breath sort of thing, because they know if either of these two guys die, they can make an excuse and they can finish this. It can just be done and over with. So Mars follows Hector around, making him more intimidating and keeping him full of battle lust. So he's running around like trying to fight everything he can. Then later, Athena and Hera and Juno both go join the fight, and Juno convinces Zeus not to stop the two of them, arguing that Zeus didn't stop Mars from joining, which is a very good point. And Zeus, as I've said before, is he's sort of trying to keep neutral in all of this. It doesn't always work, as we've seen and as we'll continue to see, mostly because it's between his daughter and his wife. And there's just, any man who has a wife and a daughter, or even a wife and a son, he will know that that's not the kind of fight you want to get in the middle of. So then finally, Athena convinces Diomed to attack Mars. And that's pretty much where we end things, is Athena convinces him to go attack Mars, and Diomed does and wounds Mars, and Mars retreats from the field of battle and goes up to the heavens. And that's it for this week. All right, I'll see you guys later.